Welcome back to Imagine IP video blog, where we distill some of your important IP insights. Today we're diving into something that might sound dry on paper, but is actually packed with fascinating insights about where Australian business is headed. IP Australia just dropped their annual report, and before you click away thinking boring government statistics, stick with me here. This isn't just a bunch of numbers, it's basically Australia's innovation report card. And the story it tells about how our businesses handled the past year, it's pretty compelling. So grab your coffee and let's unpack what's really happening in the world of Australian intellectual property. All right, let's start with the big question. Why should you care about intellectual property statistics? I get it. Annual report and IP data aren't exactly the stuff that gets your pulse racing on a Monday morning. But here's the thing. Think of this report as a window into Australia's creative brain. It shows us how businesses responded to all the chaos of the past year. The global uncertainty, supply chain nightmares, economic plot twists. Did companies hunker down and stop innovating? Or did they double down and start protecting everything they could think of? The numbers don't lie, and they're actually revealing some fascinating patterns about where we're headed as an economy. Plus, and this is the part that should really grab your attention, understanding these trends might just give you insider insight into where the smart money is flowing in your industry. So let's dive in.
So what's the story in the data? Well, it's actually pretty interesting when you dig into what Australians are protecting with their intellectual property. First, the good news. Trademark filings are up 2.8%. Not massive growth, but steady. People are clearly still serious about protecting their brand names, which makes sense in an increasingly crowded marketplace. But here's where it gets really interesting. Design filings absolutely exploded. We're talking an 8.9% jump. That's nearly 9%. So Australian businesses are clearly focused on how their products look and feel. Think about it. In a world where everything's becoming commoditized, the design is often what sets you apart. Now here's the puzzle that had me scratching my head when I first saw these numbers. Standard patents, they're actually going backwards, down 3.3% this year. And that's on top of a 2.4% drop last year. So we're looking at 2 consecutive years of declining patent filings. On the surface, that sounds pretty concerning for innovation. Are we getting less creative? Are businesses just not inventing anymore? Well, there's a small bright spot in there. Australian companies themselves are actually filing slightly more patents, up 0.9%. It's not huge, and it's actually slower than the growth we saw in 2023, but at least our local inventors haven't completely checked out. And here's something that blew my mind. While fewer patents are being filed, IP Australia has been absolutely crushing it on the approval side. They granted 23.8% more patents than last year. Someone's been working serious overtime in the patent office, clearing through that backlog like nobody's business. The international picture tells an even more interesting story. US filings are dropping off, but China is more than making up for it. Chinese applications are surging across the board. Patents, trademarks, designs, you name it. And they're particularly active in 3 sectors that probably won't surprise you: e-commerce, electric vehicles and batteries, and biotech. Speaking of biotech, this is where things get really exciting. While pharmaceutical and medical technology patents dropped, biotechnology patents showed solid 4.7% growth. But get this, Australia's biotech industry specifically had a 31.7% increase in filings. That's not just a number on a page. You can see it everywhere in the Australian ecosystem right now. More funding, more startups, more genuine innovation. It's one of those rare instances where the IP data actually matches what you're seeing on the ground. What all this means is that competition is heating up, especially in these emerging sectors, and IP protection is becoming more critical than ever. Now let's talk about something that'll really get your attention: how intellectual property directly impacts your business outcomes. Because this isn't just about legal protection, it's about cold, hard cash. Here's a stat that stopped me in my tracks. If you're a small or medium-sized business and you actually take the time to file for intellectual property rights, you're 16% more likely to see high employment growth. That's not just correlation. That's real data showing that protecting your ideas literally helps you hire more people. But wait, it gets better. We always hear about startups trying to impress investors, right? Well, turns out having trademarks and patents in your back pocket isn't just about legal protection. These IP filings are directly linked to higher startup valuations, better revenue per worker, and yes, more jobs. Now here's the part that I think is absolutely brilliant, and honestly most entrepreneurs probably don't know about this. The patent system has this built-in flexibility that savvy businesses are using in really clever ways. So here's how it works. When you file a patent in Australia, you don't immediately get examined. You've got up to 5 years to actually request that examination. But here's the kicker. About 42% of successful patent holders actually jump the gun and request examination early without being asked. Why would they do that? This is where the psychology gets fascinating. The businesses that speed up examination, they tend to have much better outcomes after getting their patents. They're more likely to actually commercialize their inventions, build on them with follow-up patents, and generally make money from their IP. It's like they're saying, we know this is going to work, so let's get moving. But small businesses, they're playing a completely different game. This study found something counterintuitive. For smaller inventors, delays actually predict stronger outcomes down the road. Think about it. If you're a startup, you might file your patent early to stake your claim, but then you need time to figure out your business model, find investors, maybe pivot your approach. That delay isn't procrastination, it's strategic thinking. Large corporations, on the other hand, are like, we have the money, we have the plan, let's go. They've got the resources to handle prosecution costs, and they've probably already wargamed their commercialization strategy before they even filed. There's also this really interesting competitive dynamic at play. When one company delays their patent examination, it actually slows down innovation by their competitors in that space, because everyone's sitting in this fog of uncertainty about what's going to be protected.
Now let's zoom out and talk about some major developments on the international stage that could impact how you do business. We're looking at 2 significant treaties that Australia has been involved in. First up is something that's been decades in the making, a new treaty around traditional knowledge and genetic resources. Basically, if you're filing a patent for an invention that's based on traditional knowledge linked to genetic resources, you're going to need to identify which indigenous community or local group provided that knowledge. What's really interesting about this is the intent behind it. It's all about encouraging genuine collaboration and benefit sharing with traditional custodians. So instead of just taking traditional knowledge and running with it, there's now a framework that recognizes and respects where that knowledge came from. The second treaty is the Riyadh Design Law Treaty, and this one's more straightforward but equally important if you're dealing with international design protection. Essentially, it's about making life easier for designers who want to protect their work across multiple countries. Right now, that process can be pretty complex and bureaucratic, so this treaty aims to simplify and streamline everything. What does this mean for your business? Well, if you're working with traditional knowledge or filing designs internationally, you might need to adjust your processes and policies. It's not necessarily a huge burden, but it's definitely something to be aware of and plan for. On a more practical note, IP Australia has been busy launching some really useful new tools, the IP Rights Overview and IP Rapid, both designed to help you make better decisions about protecting your intellectual property. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? First, Australian businesses are still innovating, but they're being more strategic about what they protect. The surge in design filings tells us companies are focused on differentiation through user experience and aesthetics. Second, the biotech boom is real, and if you're in that space, the competition for IP protection is only going to intensify. Third, and this is crucial, if you're a small business, don't sleep on intellectual property. The data clearly shows it's not just about legal protection, it's a genuine driver of business growth and employment. And finally, the international landscape is shifting. With China ramping up its IP filings and new treaties changing the rules around traditional knowledge, staying informed isn't just helpful, it's essential. That's a wrap on today's deep dive into IP Australia's annual report. I know we covered a lot of ground, but I hope you can see why these numbers matter for your business strategy. If you found this useful, make sure to subscribe and share it with someone who could benefit from these insights. And hey, if you're dealing with IP decisions in your own business, these trends might just help you think about your strategy differently. Thanks for listening to Imagine IP, and we'll catch you next time.